This conference will now be recorded.
So, good morning to everybody and welcome to this workshop, which is linked to the Work Package 3 of the Retrace project. The aim of this project is to present some of the work that we have been conducting within Work Package 3. This has been mainly realized by the early stage researchers of the Retrace project within Work Package 3. And it is related to the last deliverable of this specific work package. What we have done in this piece of work has been interrogating ourselves about how circular futures might look like. What sort of configurations could the circular economy take when practically implemented? So we will present the findings of this process, of this exercise, and workshop will also include the possibility for attendants to provide their feedback on the findings that we will present. So without any further delay, I'll pass the microphone to Giuseppe and Leandro, who will be leading this presentation and will also share with us the details of the interactive process we will launch this month. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Andrea. So, welcome everybody. My name is Giuseppe Pignol, and me and Leandro will together present this work. This is a deliverable that we are doing with Working Package 3. In this specific presentation, we are mapping what are the possible circular economy features through scenario exploration. We are the two of us presenting, but this is a job that the whole Working Package 3 is doing, and we also have the rest of the ESRs that will help in the if we have questions and answers at the end of the presentation. And yeah, the whole thing, the whole goal of this session is to gather, to present you some insights on how these features we map them, but also to gather your feedback. So I'm going to share now in the comments link to a Google form. This is a questionnaire about what is your opinion on the different scenarios that we will present. You don't need to fill the form now. You can do it after the presentation, after we explain the scenarios. And as Andrea said before, this presentation will be both recorded and uploaded on YouTube, so you can even fill it later and rewatch the presentation if you wish to. Okay, let's get started. So first, before starting, let's make a thought exercise. I'll show you a couple of pictures and you have to guess. You don't have to reply to it, maybe if you want in the comments, but you don't need to answer this question, but just think, when these photos have been taken, what is the year from the photos I will show you? And this is the first picture. This looks, it is like a city. You see tall skyscrapers, probably concrete, steel and glass. This is a city that is mostly car dominated. So you see headways where pedestrians and cars are segregated, and most of the public space is devoted to car transportation, which seems, I mean, you see very few pedestrians and a lot of cars. So this is a city designed around cars. This is the next picture, and you see a specific building from this city. So again, you see this segregation on cars on a side and pedestrians on the other side, and you see the city, well, sorry, the building that actually doesn't have windows, so it relies on energy, probably fuel generated or electricity to have light and ventilation inside of the building. This is the next picture, and you see again the same design. This city, it's dominated by highways, cars, and you have some skyscrapers and low buildings. And this is how this city is designed. Also, you have a grid. This is how the buildings are separated, which, yeah. So I see a lot of comments, 50s, 2000s, 90s, 60s, max. Mario, okay. So this city, this is actually not a city, this is a model. And it was done on 1939. That was an exposition called Futurama. It was sponsored by the General Motors, and what they did you have to understand the context. It was 1939. Henry Ford already popularized the car, and he managed to make it affordable. And we lived in that age where it was before the war. Cars were becoming a thing, and people, urban planners, but also other kind of innovators, were thinking how the city of the future had to look like based on this technology. And they designed a city around the car, and that's an important thing. This was not real. This kind of city didn't exist at the time. This was an exercise of imagination. It became real. This is the neighborhood where I lived before I started the PhD. It's in Utrecht. It's on an island, but I mean, you can tell that it's Netherlands because it's flat. But otherwise, these kind of buildings and this kind of urban design and streets, they could be pretty much from anywhere in Europe. That could be Moscow, that could be the red belt of Barcelona, that could be a banlieue of Paris. But the construction of this specific neighborhood started on 1955, and a lot of people say 60s, 50s, precisely because of this. This will remind you to the architecture that Europe built after World War II, when they reconstructed. They didn't just reconstruct the continent and had to create a lot of dwelling for the baby boom and the growing population, but also they had to redesign the cities and urban public spaces around new technologies, mostly cars. This is important because this is telling what matters. The imagination, this exposition of Futurama, and this the way all urban planners across Europe, from Scandinavia to the south of Spain and from Ireland to Moscow, they imagined the city like that. And they didn't just imagine, they did build cities like that. So there is a very important link that we need to pay attention to, that the connection between how when we collectively imagine the future and how we end up building and making this imagination performative. Why this is important? This link is important because also if you reflect on our jobs, we are thinking on the circular economy. We make research on the circular economy. Some people from here and from NGOs, they make events and public thinking. Some people may become business people in the future and build circular innovations, implement circular innovations. So what kind of circular economy are we building on the future? Is there one kind, or how does it look like? It's important to be aware that this pair called Futurama was not one thing that happened once only. We are constantly imagining the future, and different stakeholders, different groups build the future. This is when I googled what is the future of fuels. Of course, fuel industries invest a lot in both biofuels, but also in hydrogen-based fuels. So they try to envision a future where those companies are part of it. The same happens with the car industry and the car sector, and how they try to imagine the cars. The thing is, who imagines the future and what kind of vision of the future we end up acting, because we are all building future as researchers. So we may end up as these urban planners building the city for cars and building for and working and reproducing the imagination of the car industry. Are we reproducing who decides what is socially desirable and what we have to build? This is a thing that a question that we need to reflect on. There's a very good approach on future studies. This PowerPoint is entirely a copy-paste of quotes from this book on what future studies is and it's not, from Jean Dater. It's an open source book, so feel free to Google it and get it if you're interested in reading on it. But the first thing, and I'm sorry if I'm disappointing you, we are talking about the future, and some of you may think, oh, this is a tarot session. Nice. Can you read my hand? What does it say in my lines? Am I gonna implement solar panels in my house? No, we are not going to do that. The future cannot be predicted, of course, because it doesn't exist, but it is imagined, collectively imagined, and then we share this imagination, and then we execute this future. And this is the thing that we need to understand, because the way we imagine the future, or the way we end up buying the imagination from other people and from other sectors, shape the way we act and what we do, what kind of research we promote, what kind of papers we write, what kind of events we organize, and also the events we organize, the papers we write, and the innovation we implement shapes the future. So we have to be very aware of this relation. It's very important to have it clear. What future studies does is to understand and apply theories and methods of future studies. So we want to study what enables individuals and groups to anticipate the futures, but also to shape it. It's not about prediction, but it's about preferred futures. What do we prefer? What do we define as commonly desirable? And secondly, we want to, from the future studies, one of the goals is to facilitate this formulating process, these implementation processes, and this re-envisioning of the future, because this is important. This work, it precedes what we do as strategic planning. This strategic planning that can be literal urban planning, as the people who end up designing these car-centered cities in the 50s and 60s, but also planning on what papers we plan, what is the future research and future projects that we do. So the aim of this presentation is to make a catalog of circular futures, and we made a catalog of 9 futures that Leandro will present to you. And then through the poll that I shared with you in the comments, we want to define whether this is enough, what kind of futures we designed, and how desirable or acceptable do we find them. And the next step in this research is to define what conceptualizations of economic performance, and how we as researchers that work on circular economy, how we have to build certain concepts and what do we prioritize on our research in order to generate certain outcomes. So now I give the floor to Leandro. Can you, Leandro, share your screen?
Yes, can you see it?
I do.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Josep. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here with us. I will summarize, or try to summarize a bit, the work we have done on this mapping of futures. Well, first of all, we started with a literature review on different approaches to futures, and in particular to futures of the circular economy, of future scenarios. Then we made a selection of mostly 4 approaches that we found that were most suitable for our task. Those were qualitative approaches, which build future narratives based on axes or dimensions. In particular, we took a starting point, a classification that was proposed by Bauwens and others, which we complemented, of course, with insights from the other 3 papers. Then we had many group discussions, and we came up and we proposed new dimensions or axes for the analysis and other new future scenarios. Well, regarding the classification framework by Bauwens, which was our starting point, this was based on a 2x2 classification based on 2 axes, which are the nature of the innovations which are going to be deployed in the future scenario, ranging from low-tech innovations, which is mainly social innovations or regulatory innovations, and to high-tech, and on the other side, high-tech innovations. This is features which are based on new generation technical innovations. The other axis or dimension was the type of political governance, which could range from a more decentralized political governance or a more centralized political governance. This led the authors to a typology of 4 future scenarios. The first future scenario that they came up with was the circular, they called it circular modernism. It is a combination of high-tech innovations and a very centralized political governance. This is a future which is in which the transition towards circular economy is in the hands mainly of a few large enterprises or companies, and the government also has a part on this, but it is mainly based on large businesses. Then this circular modernist approach or response to an eco-modernist approach to circular economy, in which the possibility of decoupling economic growth is based on the use of high technology. The second type of future scenario, the second future scenario by Bauwens and others, is planned circularity, which was based on a combination of low technology innovations and a centralized governance. Here, the transition is centrally conducted by the government through coercive measures, such as command and control regulations. They relate this future with the authoritarian environmentalist approach, and which actually other authors refer to this approach as a type of fortress circularity, which actually we find more suitable to describe this kind of future, for reasons that I will explain later. Then the third scenario they came up with was the peer-to-peer circularity, which is a combination of high technology, mostly digital technologies, blockchain platforms, also 3D printing, Internet of Things, which allowed for a decentralization of both political governance and also of productive activities. The authors associate this scenario with the sharing economy, collaborative consumption, distributed production, and it is mainly about a shift from ownership to performance, and also from consumption to prosumption. Then the fourth scenario is the bottom-up sufficiency, which is a combination of low-tech innovations and decentralized political governance. This is about a general economic downscaling based on decentralized small-scale production within self-sufficient local communities. This scenario is, of course, very closely related to degrowth literature and the promotion of sufficiency over efficiency. These four scenarios are, of course, very interesting as a departure point of to imagine future scenarios, but of course they have some limitations. The authors themselves point this out in their paper, and also other literature. There's other literature about this, the limitations of this analysis, but we pointed out mainly 5 limitations which are all related to one thing. First, it's not the same as centralized political governance to a centralized or large-scale production. The implications are not exactly the same. Then, of course, the authoritarian decision-making is not only a prerogative of the state, but also, or of a strong state, but also if we have a weak state, monopolies or oligopolies can also lead to authoritarian decision-making. Also, a state-planned circular economy does not necessarily need to mean a low-tech innovation circular economy, and China is one example of that, or the approach to circular economy that China has. And then technological innovations leading to decentralization on principle can be afterwards co-opted by large firms and then be centralized again. And finally, uncoordinated peer-to-peer technologies can, of course, lead to rebound effects. And we find that all of this has a close relationship with a main limitation, that is that, all these scenarios do not challenge, or any of these scenarios challenge the underlying relations of production. Therefore, we discussed this among the work package 3 group, and we thought that the new dimensions needed to be incorporated into the analysis. Some of them were taken, all of them were taken from relevant literature, and well, they were mainly the scale of production, ranging from small or local to large or global, access or ownership of final goods, ranging from more collective to an individual or private regime. And the one we think was most important, that helped us most to think about the new scenarios, was the property of the means of production, which can also means the property of the innovations, or who is leading or who has the control of the innovations, which can be more collective or more private. This led us to build a large number of new scenarios. Actually, they were subdivisions of the scenarios by Bauwens with some additives from the other literature, but we came out from a larger number. Then we realized that some of these scenarios were not interesting, or were not plausible, or they couldn't stand by themselves. So we merged some of them, and we ended up with a new classification that has 9 scenarios. That, of course, they are plenty, and this is one of the things we would like to discuss with you. But we think that they all have interesting things to analyze and to enrich the discussion. Now I will try to describe them a bit. The first 3 scenarios are part of this group of, or are related to this group of modernist circular economy scenarios, where there is centralized governance, political governance, together with a high-tech or a high-tech innovation approach to the circular economy. This is in the line of the eco-modernist approach, and these scenarios all share the idea of that you can decouple economic growth through the use of high-tech innovations, and they also are based on large-scale production. The main difference between these 3 scenarios is the role of the state regarding the productive process, going through more involved to less involved. Now, the first scenario is a multinational enterprise-led modernist circularity. It is, of course, very related to business as usual kind of circular modernism, where large companies are leading the transition. The state only sets regulations and incentives, and this scenario is in this scenario, production is large scale and is related to global value chains, and the regime of property of the goods is individual, or the access to goods is individual, and there's still with mostly private ownership of goods. And of course, this is a market-based and profit-driven scenario. The second, or intermediate case, would be a welfare state modernist circularity. Of course, again, it's kind of business as usual, but with an increased state presence. Therefore, it is very important, the circular public procurement is very important, which is done through large private companies that compete for the public concessions of this public procurement. There is a stronger or greater public investment in high-tech innovations, and the state promote also collaborative consumption. And this scenario is, of course, profit-driven, but it has strong mechanisms to redistribute income, as a main difference with the previous scenario. Then the third scenario is the state-led modernist circularity, where, of course, here the state is leading the transition via strong regulations, public procurement also, and but now there's very important role of large state-owned companies. This is again a large-scale production scenario, but also at the meso level, it has a very strong presence of industrial parks, which are publicly promoted, and this promote also industrial symbiosis. This scenario is built around collective ownership of strategic resources and goods, There is, of course, private presence, but only in non-strategic sectors. And this scenario is welfare-driven, and profit is a secondary goal. Then a second group of scenarios, we identify them with this idea of a fortress circular economy. This implies a centralized governance, an approach to circularity that understands the circular economy as a strategy or as a competitive strategy in a context of a global struggle for critical resources and materials. So this is a kind of defensive type of circular economy, which we found this description was found better than just saying a planned circular economy, because as you can see, we found two different versions, one which is state-led, but other that can be firm-led. So the main difference is that we found this, the first type would be a kind of autarkic fortress circularity, which is state-led and mostly protectionist. Circular economy is here based on coercion and rationing. This does not mean that they are not, this scenario does not use high technology, but high technology is not or is only used as a way to control resources and not in other ways. So here we have a large-scale production, but we can also have regional production, but mostly based on local markets or for local markets. There exist private oligopolies are supervised by public authorities. This can be seen as a welfare-driven scenario, but within national borders, without taking into consideration the effects on other territories. And of course, this is still a free market in non-strategic sectors. On the other side, we found, or we described a landlord fortress circularity, which is firm-led by mostly multinational firms, which can be monopoly or oligopolic sectors. Here, there is an extended property of resources and final goods for firms. This idea of firms that retain the ownership from their phase of extraction to the final good, so they control the whole productive and consumption process. This landlord fortress circularity also has a global scale. This is beyond state borders. Actually, state borders or states here do not have too much power to control these great firms, or there's no public control on these great firms. So this is a scenario which is mainly profit-driven, and it can lead to commodification of social relations in general, or to a further commodification of social relations, and there are no clear mechanisms to guarantee social justice. Then a third group of scenarios related to this idea of peer-to-peer circularity. Again, here the digital innovations are central, and these technologies, such as blockchain, platforms, 3D printing, etc., they allow for a decentralization of both political governance and a productive process. The main difference, again, relates here to who is the owner of these new innovations, of these innovations. Here we found then two plausible scenarios, or two possible scenarios. One is an open access peer-to-peer circularity. It consists of a shift from ownership of final goods to collaborative consumption. Also, a shift from consumption to prosumption, to be more involved. The user is more involved in all the productive process and has also tools to be part of the productive process. This also consists of a decentralized productive systems, and also we can find here consumer cooperatives, which are all supported by this peer-to-peer technology. And this scenario would be mainly welfare-driven. However, as there is no kind of coordinated or more centralized kind of coordination, there are in principle there are no mechanisms to avoid rebound effects or to guarantee social justice. On the other hand, we found this idea of a platform capitalism circularity, which also this comes out of the literature, where we can see that these technologies, these digital technologies, were co-opted by large companies, or maybe it's very probable that are co-opted by large companies. Mainly there is a decentralization of private platforms. This can start locally or regional, but as this is a winner-takes-all kind of market, the market of platforms, then it's very probable that they turn into large and global-scale platforms. There is a scarce public control on the activities of these large firms, and this is, of course, a scenario that is profit-driven and that can lead to further commodification of social relations. And of course, there is no clear mechanism to guarantee social justice. And finally, the scenarios linked to the bottom-up sufficiency circularity. Here, the main characteristic is, again, the decentralization of political governance and also a general downscaling of production. This transition here is not based on technical innovations, but it can be based on local traditional knowledge, for example, or also on the exploitation of local resources. So we foresee two variants of this kind of circularity, which is very related to the degrowth literature. On the one hand, we find that a case in which the community owns the local productive systems, and there also are local consumer cooperatives, which are based on traditional knowledge. So here, the strategic resources are collectively owned, and therefore, as it is community-based and cooperative-based, the degrowth in this case can result from public consensus. So there is a scenario that is welfare-driven, and sufficiency and social justice are both supported on local cooperation networks. On the other hand, we foresee a degrowth scenario, but which is led by firms. Actually, this is the case of a failed economy, probably, because if not, would probably the fact that it was degrowing wouldn't make sense. So this is a scenario that is firm-led and also rent-seeking, private property of resources and final goods. This can be from a local scale. Production can be local, but capital may be local or foreign. There is no public control on firms' activities, and here in this scenario, degrowth is the result from relations of dominance and exploitation. Therefore, this is a scenario which is profit-driven and coordinated, and there are no clear mechanisms to guarantee social justice. Well, these were more or less the general characteristics of the scenarios we built. These are the main bibliographic references we were based on. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Please remember that you have in the comments an online survey that well, we very much appreciate if you can contribute with your opinion. And well, of course, if there are any questions or comments that you would like to do, we will be also very glad to hear them and to open now the discussion. Take into consideration, please, the questions of the survey as a guide to start thinking now in the following the discussion about these scenarios.
Thank you, Leandro, for this very good presentation, and thank you to the whole Work Package 3 team for putting together this fantastic work, which really extends the work that has been done by other authors in the field, bringing in new dimensions which are often neglected in the circular economy debate. Of course, as you clarified, we very much started from the paper that Thomas Bauwens and his co-authors put together, looking at circular futures. However, we realized that this conceptualization was missing some key elements. And of course, it was proposing a very capitalist conceptualization of circular economy in all the variants, in all the possible variants. And I really liked, the initial premise of your presentation, where you stated that, well, we can invent the future. I mean, we need to dare to invent the future, as Thomas Sankara would say, a very famous African revolutionary leader. So these exercises are very much welcome, because besides, the output that we will be getting from this, the deliverable, maybe a paper, well, this is a very nice thought experiment in which we all need to engage for understanding what are the challenges for the transition towards the circular economy, and what kind of circular economy we want to build. I don't know if there is any specific question that you want to ask, that the audience wants to ask. Of course, you can essentially type your name in the chat, and we'll give you the possibility of asking questions. I just reiterate, the importance of the feedback to this presentation, either through comments, but also very importantly through the survey, through the short survey that we have just disseminated, in such a way, that we can improve this conceptualization and maybe include some aspects which were neglected. So we have a couple of people signed up for questions. Mario first.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Well, first of all, I would like to thank everybody, the Josep, Wasim, Mohammed, especially Leandro, because he was a new entry, and he really get on very well and very soon with the rest of the group. And I think that was a very successful integration. So, congrats. I'm very happy to see that some of the principles that we start discussing at the very beginning of the projects, like the fact that science and technology are very political, no? Are social and politically constructed, and I see that with some proud, to be honest, that at the end of the project, these ideas are very much entrenched with in our PhD students. Now, my only comment is because we are going to have the final events of Retrace in Greece, and the last day will be in combination with the Just to See project, which is the H2020 project that I'm leading. It would be good if some of you can contribute with this deliverable in the workshop, in the national workshop that is supposed to be based on this idea of imagining circular future in Greece. So I invite you to be present at the workshop and to be active in the workshop, because is exactly what we want to do. I mean, what you just show, especially specifically at the beginning of the presentation, is exactly what we want to do. We want to expose a different, a variety of stakeholders with the possibility of creating their own desirable future, circular future, and then set out an agenda for achieving that. So this is the important element of doing this exercise, not only imagining future, but then what kind of political action we need to get to that future. So again, thank you very much and congratulations for the work. And I hope that we will be able to publish a reduced version of the deliverable in a good journal, possibly.
Thank you, Mario. Yeah, we speaking about what you were mentioning, we are already in talk also with our colleagues from ABIS, Carolina and Katarina, about having a session in Thessaloniki, and this could happen maybe on the last day when we also have the Just to See event, where we could start from these scenarios, use ABIS scenario exploration tool, and essentially, enriching also the interactive deliberation element of this. So let's talk about this because this is clearly something we are interested in doing, and the expertise of our colleagues from ABIS can really help on this. So definitely we'll be doing something along these lines, and we have already foreseen a slot in the program for this. Katarina, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add that maybe some of you already know about the scenario exploration system. For example, Joseph is also certified now and is a game master facilitator because we also provided him with the training. So we are really excited to give you this tool because it's much more interactive to explore the scenarios through this tool that was designed by the European Commission than just to hear and read about it. It's much more interactive. You will be able to put more systemic thinking into it, to take on a role of different stakeholders. So really to imagine the future, the desired future better, but also what kind of actions we can do and each role, each stakeholder can do to come to this future. So thank you, and we will be really looking forward for this session. Definitely, let's talk soon, Andrea, to understand when there will be the time slot for this session and how we will be able to tailor the game for your needs.
Thank you very much. And we'll certainly do that, and we can also, prepare things in advance to make sure it runs well. Tommaso, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I had a question. Yeah, first of all, like, really good job. I really like the analysis, and I think it's very useful. I wanted to ask whether you are, I mean, if we have to complete the survey like it is, or if you have in mind to enrich these scenarios of more details. For example, I was thinking, I think
Tommaso, sorry if I interrupt you. Yeah, the idea is to get answers to the survey now.
Okay.
And then, of course, this is a sort of iterative method. So if further scenarios emerge, please make a note in the survey. If you think there is something that has not been captured, do make a note in the survey. Sorry for interrupting you, and go on, please. No, say what your point was.
So maybe, I don't know if it's useful to create new scenarios that might impact the result of the survey. So
yeah, no, feel free to suggest.
okay.
I mean, you know, if you think there is a missing scenario which has not been captured by the current conceptualization, definitely. I mean, you know, there is the
Yeah.
possibility to add remarks to the survey. Giuseppe and Leandro have designed it so they can also provide input. Giuseppe, please.
Yeah, this is actually a very good question, Tommaso. Thank you, because we focused a lot on explaining the scenarios and we didn't explain the questionnaire, which is very important. The way it is designed is that first you have a question that profiles you in an anonymous way, but have a big idea of what is your position and interests, so we can map you. And then we have a question, the same poll for each of the 9 scenarios, asking you on the feasibility, desirability, and also open questions. But also at the end of the poll, we have another question where we asking you on whether do you feel those are all the scenarios that we will need to map. Of course, when we talk about the future is infinite. There are infinite possibilities, and we cannot map infinite possibilities. We are trying to map what are the most strategic and the most important ones to consider. So you can answer that at the end, at the last part of the poll. And also we are asking you about whether do you think we could touch something else, or is there any kind of scenarios that are too similar and you believe it should be merged? And again, we have made a lot of literature review and a lot of readings to come up with scenarios, but this is what I'm trying to stress at the beginning. This is an exercise of imagination, and we don't have to be afraid or stigmatize the use of imagination in science, because imagination, when it's analyzed at the collective level, is an active role in plays an active role in shaping the world. So do not feel afraid to imagine, oh, I imagined something else. Do not feel any shame or any regard to say, oh, I would like to propose a new thing that you didn't consider, or you failed to consider that, or even complement the scenarios by further writing on them, because this is a free exercise and this is what it's meant to do. So yeah, feel free and do not stop yourself of imagining and contributing. Even if you think it's wrong, just do it. Feel free, really. And I see Kevin and
yes,
oh, no.
sorry, Giuseppe, sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to add a few a little detail to answer Tommaso. Besides the idea of merging or erasing or creating new scenarios, indeed although we have the outlines of the scenarios and the main criteria to divide them, we still don't have the complete narrative. So all of your contribution will be very helpful to make that narrative more or to incorporate in that narrative some aspect that, of course, we left out of the analysis because it was, as Joseph said, it was impossible to incorporate everything. But please do think about that in your comments, because it will be very important for our work.
Thank you both.
So what sort of scenario could you see as missing in the current conceptualization, Tommaso? Any idea?
No, actually, my idea was adding further aspects that could be evaluated in each scenario, and I was thinking about how each scenario is able to respond to some social needs within planetary boundaries, making connection with the Kate Raworth donut economic image of how an alternative economy could work. But I've seen that in the survey you can clearly indicate how desirable the scenarios are from an environmental, social, and economic point of view. So I think that's
definitely
the whole
another
point.
important point that will be essentially, the next step of this work that we're doing within Work Package 3 will be linking then each of the scenarios to specific KPIs. How do we measure the success of the transition within each of these scenarios? Of course, I mean, given the way in which these scenarios are designed, the indicators will probably differ as well. This also links back, to this recent paper that Ben Lowe and I wrote. How do we value things under each scenario? What is value within each of these scenarios? Ultimately, how do we measure the progress towards the objectives that
Andrea,
each of the
we don't hear you anymore. I think your mic is unplugged or something.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we stopped hearing you like 5 seconds ago. Or is it me?
Can you hear?
No, I can't hear you. I'm
okay. Yeah. So everything okay? Can I continue speaking? Give me. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, Mario has gone. So yeah, I was saying, and this was mainly a response to Tommaso, that yeah, I mean, the next step will be also to do this sort of link to the ability of each specific scenario to respond to certain challenges, and this is of course also impacting what do we need to measure within each of the scenarios. So again, Tommaso, very, very relevant point. Any other point? Any other?
If I may interrupt, maybe talking about scenarios sometimes can be a little bit too overwhelming, and you are. I mean, first let's not think about forward and measuring indicators or so on. Now let's focus on how do you imagine the future individually, all of you. I don't know if maybe I can start pinpointing people individually, but you don't need to describe a whole scenario. Hey, now come up with a new scenario. Of course, that's not realistic, but maybe you do have ideas of the future on your fields or on a certain element of the future and not able to draw a whole scenario, and you would like to talk about that. Or maybe you want to share your general feeling on the future. Maybe you feel pessimistic and you feel that the only future is climate doom and second stone age or something like that. I don't know. So can you just randomly feel free to jump out, or I'll start pointing people. How do you see it?
I think Kevin had a comment in the chat.
Oh yeah. Ooh, sorry.
Can you hear Kevin?
I cannot hear you.
Kevin, we cannot hear you. We just get some noise. I don't know if maybe you can write down or switch microphones. Meanwhile, is there any further?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now very clearly. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, sorry, yeah, I had the wrong microphone plugged in. But what was a bit unclear about the questionnaire is what's the scope? Like, if you talk about an autarky, it seems like it was really focused, how do you see it in a country? But for a lot of these scenarios, something that would work for China would not work for a tiny country like Andorra or Liechtenstein, or the other way around. And I found it a bit difficult in answering, like what's desirable, what's our enablers and barriers. It depends very much on the situation of the country you're in. For example, also the socialist welfare state idea that only worked for rich countries. So it seems very Eurocentric. And yeah, from that point of view, it's very desirable. But yeah, if you're a poor country, it's not desirable. And some ideas work really well if you do it with the entire world, but yeah, that seems to conflict with scenarios like autarky. So I think that was not the idea, but it was a bit unclear in the survey for me. So I used my imagination, but
yeah,
it was
I
made
think
it a bit difficult.
This is precisely the purpose, Kevin. We want exactly to hear about this. I mean, if you think, for instance, that the scenario works well in a given geographical context, yeah, write it openly. Say, well, this scenario might not be suitable for this context. This scenario can just be applied in this context. Talking about autarky, I wrote something about it, for instance. So yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the survey is precisely aimed at getting these details, and Giuseppe and Leandro can comment about this as well.
Yes, actually, this is a great question by Kevin. And we had also some discussions about the geographical scope of the exercise as well. Of course, maybe we didn't clarify that in the presentation, but as it is, well, now it is a good moment to do that. That these scenarios, of course, the future will be, of course, a mixture of different parts of each scenario. It will be, these are, of course, all extreme cases, but yes, it is very important, and well, maybe this is very good feedback because we need to find a way in which to incorporate this into the analysis, the geographical scope, and how the differences between the regimes of accumulation in the different countries are completely different, and so this is a very valid and a very interesting point to enhance the work. I don't know if Joseph, you have any comment, or Wasim or Mohammed, any comment about this?
No, I just want to say that I also agree with Kevin's feedback. It's a great insight and something we can definitely incorporate. It did make me think of something else related to that, that in addition to just countries and regions, that maybe we can bring in a cultural aspect of it as well. That could also have an impact on beauty scenario. But that was just a quick idea I had based on what Kevin said.
Yeah, I would say the same. Honestly, a geographical context would be an important factor. But for me, when we were talking about the scenarios, I personally thought about a general context, not necessarily a country's context. So we were thinking, okay, this scenario, this kind of we come up with these scenarios and say that, okay, these are the different scenarios that might happen. But when you want to implement it in the future, or devise initiatives in order to implement that kind of scenario, you for sure need to take into consideration the cultural aspect, the social aspect, the geographical aspect, even the political aspect of a country. So yeah, the comment of Kevin is completely valid, I would say.
Okay, thank you. And I think there is a question from Felipe. Giuseppe, Leandro, do you want to respond about that? The target audience of the survey. Well, for now, we can say, you know, this survey has been designed for the Retrace Consortium in order to capture the views of the consortium and of you know, the sister projects that we have within the Retrace ecosystem. Of course, you know, after this first round, you can also plan to extend the audience to further stakeholders. Giuseppe, Leandro, don't know if you want to add to this.
Yeah, I think this is more the methods that follow will follow the deliverable, but the session of today is not to discuss the deliverable. It's about talking and discussing scenarios and sharing imagination of the future. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the research itself, because this is another thing. We will find a significant group of experts. So if you can find it in Retrace, fine. If not, we will extend it outside. That depends on the amount of answers we get. But again, the goal of the session today is to bring these scenarios together and have this feedback of imagination. Again, the question today: how do you see the future? What do you envision when you think yourself on 2050? You don't need to use a geographical context, because we are trying to get abstract ideas of the future that then we can envision they can change in a contextual way. But how do you, I mean, if you think about yourself, how do you see yourself in 2050? How do you see the world in which you live in 2050? And again, there are no wrong answers, so just feel free to jump in.
Okay. Any other questions or feedback? Giuseppe, do you want to pinpoint to people directly? Very good future imagination from Kevin. 2050, I want to enjoy early retirement and let the new generation solve the issues of that day and age.
Oh, Kevin is an optimist.
Yeah.
That is very popular, that vision.
Especially in the higher education sector.
I don't know, but I see Katarina, now you have your camera on. So because also I know you worked a lot in ABs in future and future thinking, not as an ABs, but you as at a personal level. How do you see the world you will live in the future?
Yes, so we have also our own scenarios in ABIS, also coming from a different project, and that's about how also the sustainable lifestyles will look like in 2050. So we are discussing this quite often with our participants. But I was thinking that maybe what could help is to ask maybe specifically, what do we see, where do we see, for example, the future of work in 2050, or where do we see education? How is education going to look like in 2050? A bit more, you know, going into these sectors. Because it is hard to just give a very clear idea of where do we see the future in general in 2050. So maybe having a bit more discussion on, okay, education, work, with having in mind the circularity could help to spur discussion. How do I see the future? I would also see that, for example, there hopefully would be less wars, that we wouldn't be or having to have defense and, you know, putting all the investments to have, I don't know, 2% in 2% of GDP for weapons and all of these things. Hopefully the future of work will also look very different. So I could see, well, I think we already see the pockets in the future already now, that there are talks that there will be 4-day working weeks, having more flexible working, so more, you know, home officing, of course. But I think that is happening slightly already now, so that could be not so much of a future, far future, but near future. That there will be also more artificial intelligence, so we will not have to work also, you know, less manually, but our work will be more creative and more using still our brains and intelligence, but less manual working. And then how our society will look like. Also, I would like to see everybody to be more tolerant. We can see that now there's a lot of movements, different refugees coming in. So this will be changing. The society living in Europe, for example, will completely change. Also the whole population, now there is this dominance of if I can say, of dominance of white people, but that will be very different in the future because the natality is higher in Asia and is higher in Africa. So that will definitely change also the dynamics. The migration will change. The power of countries will change as well. I think because of this natality and the different population, I think Europe as now that is kind of the power is dominant there as well with the US and Russia, but I think in the future it will change and it will be more the Asian countries, China, hard to say, probably not Japan, but Korea and Singapore, India, Africa. So they will become more. There will be more power there on an international basis. So that's just something that I'm thinking of for the future.
That's a very inspiring thought. Thank you very much for sharing it, Katka. I'm taking some notes from it because
there is
I
a question from Jay. Giuseppe, would you like to handle it?
I just sent a message to Leandro because I don't understand the question.
I'm responding in the chat. Yeah, basically, the desirability means, the desirability of these scenarios to you, to the person who is responding to the survey. For instance, I don't like the characteristics of some of the eco-modernist scenarios. I don't like the autarky circular economy. So to me, these are not desirable. They're not desirable socially, they're not desirable economically, they're not desirable from an environmental point of view as well to me, because they just address some aspects of the circular economy imperatives. They can just be a partial response to the climate change challenges we have. So, but these, of course, depends on your personal sensitivity and how you imagine your own future. So desirability means, correct me if I'm wrong, Giuseppe, Leandro, how close each of these scenarios is to your ideal future. So this is what we mean by desirability. At least I have interpreted it in this way.
Yes, I agree with Andrea's explanation. That was the intention of the question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
I wouldn't like to lose that thread because before Katarina gave a nice idea and a nice visualization of the future, and she introduced a lot of elements that we didn't discuss. So the role of AI. I mean, we have some scenarios that talk about platforms, but not really the tolerance piece. And I think those are important reflections that, I mean, part of the open questions is that we can include this reflection on the description of the scenarios. Maybe I'll start pointing people with the cameras on, but yeah, I don't know what are the thoughts of other people. Maybe Azar, how do you see the environment in which you will live in, let's say, 2050? Or how would you like to see?
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, first of all, thank you for your presentation. I think it was amazing, and I also liked all the scenarios you were talking about. I think in terms of environment, I totally agree with one of the questions that also raised by the previous audience, that they were mentioning something that it really depends on the region as well, I think, because I mean, some of the concepts of the circular economy is not valid in some regions. I mean, it definitely depends on the geography. And yeah, the way I see the future, as Katska was also saying, that I just hope that there would be less war and less poverty, especially in some developing countries, and less consumerism. And I think hopefully in future access is becoming as valuable as ownership. I mean, nowadays streaming media, social media, and you know, streaming media, instead of buying like some products, like sharing economy, you know, instead of buying a car, you can pay everything by sharing all the expenses. And also, if we say AI, artificial intelligence, is going to become very popular, and I think the human life would be much easier, but at the same time we should be conscious of how the way we use it. Yeah, more or less like this.
Thank you very much, Azar. That's great. It's very inspiring to hear your opinions, because we never had these open and explicit conversations about the future. And what I realize every time you open up this conversation is that people have a lot of very inspiring things to say. And yeah, it's also these things that we just don't think. So you see the presentation, we are very sad economists who talk about means of production and about how to produce, how to consume, and that's it. And these elements like poverty, what to the consumerism, but also maybe international relations, we just dismiss them. And I think this is what makes these kind of sessions is what make your feedback very valuable. So thanks again. Okay, who's gonna be my next victim? Do you want to be Carolina? Would you like to jump?
We don't hear you, Carolina, even though you unmuted yourself.
Maybe because you're using a mic from external or something. Or sometimes if you go on the top right, or you need to take, I need to take my headphones. Okay, so maybe while we wait, are they far? Yeah, somebody can go first. Okay, Katya.
No, sorry to interrupt you, Josep. While Carolina is looking for the headphones, maybe I can share a thought that regarding these great comments that we had before. And yes, there are some dimensions that are indeed very interesting to incorporate to the analysis, as Katarina before said. She talked about the education and the future of work. Actually, we thought a bit about a couple of these aspects, but mostly related to some specific scenarios in which it was like very obvious that there could be a very specific effect. For example, regarding the future of work, in the platform circularity scenario, this scenario of digitalization co-opted by the very large firms, we thought that one of the possible outcomes or social outcomes would be a further precarization of labor relations. But of course, as we are seeing some of that now in the present, but the dualistic, the dialectic nature of the reality is generating the answer, because now there are for example, there are unionizing in some of these companies. So it's very difficult to ensure or to foresee a specific future, because the future itself will make the relations to change and to go against that. So, well, these are, of course, very interesting well, things to also to incorporate to the narratives, these dialectics, and also the well, yes, mostly this how things can change within each scenario.
Yeah, if you remember, Leandro, also when we were having the conversations among ourselves, we also had, you know, this idea about further axes that could have been added in looking at, you know, the degree of openness of a society that somebody was mentioning earlier. You know, do we live in an open society which, you know, values diversity, or are we turning towards a more communitarian society, communitarian in right-wing sense? So, you know, ethnically homogeneous, religiously homogeneous. This is probably, you know, something else that could be considered. At the moment, we are implicitly considering it. For instance, you know, when we oppose the autarky scenario, which is likely to be established on this kind of communitarian logic, opposing it to the eco-socialist one, which still relies on sort of self-sufficiency logic, but of course in a more, you know, open society, you know, which is not based on what the Latin would call ius sanguinis, but more on ius soli. So yeah, I think, you know, these are clearly some interesting aspects that could be considered. One thing, yeah, I found the introduction of the autarky scenario quite timely, because, you know, this scenario in a way represents a sort of war circular economy, which could be something that we could witness soon, in sense that, you know, we are already seeing efforts to implement circular economy practices to address material scarcity due to the disruption of value chains. So probably not a desirable scenario, but very plausible one. Thank you.
Then maybe we can return to Carolina, if everything's okay with the headphones.
Yes, can you hear me? Perfect. Yes, I was, you know, thinking how else I could contribute here. And of course, I share very much the future that Katka and Azar already started describing. But it's really important to me to add, you know, the dimension, you know, technology versus behavior. So personally, I really think that you know, there are a lot of professionals, especially in the business side, that have this I don't know, expectation or thinking that technology will save us. Like I really don't believe that. I think it's very simplistic, and you know, it's the problems that we are facing and we'll be facing in the future are very complex. And I do think that there is a role for technology, and of course, some of the like, I don't think we're going to, you know, like solve or try to address climate change problems and everything else you know, without technology. We need that as part of the solution, but it's not going to save us. On the other hand, I really think that so and the future that I imagine, we need to change our lifestyles. And so, you know, I would rather prefer the power of changing the future or creating a better future in the hands of, you know, everyone, of everybody, than, you know, the lucky few that get to have a lot of funds and create some phantasmagoric, fancy new tech solution. And this also does not mean to say that we suddenly need to drop everything that we've been cultivating and developing as a society. But let's be honest that many things are really unnecessary. Thinking about you know, fashion right now, like, I do like it, but I do also realize that the way that we have been consuming and B, producing as a result, or I don't know which one is you know, the what is causing what at this point. But yeah, that is, for example, something that is totally in our hands to change. I know that in some other cases this is going to be difficult, but I do think that, you know, in the future, I would like everybody to be aware of you know, the small changes that they can take in their everyday life and how they can contribute to a you know, a society that lives more within what we are given by the planet. And I also maybe I wanted to add that you know, against this backdrop, I think we could potentially, you know, like go away from, you know, material consumption to consumption of services. So I think that, you know, in the future that I envision, things like, you know, education, especially lifelong education, is going to be, like, I hope it's going to be you know, much more of a thing. We all working in the academic field, so for us it's kind of like normal, like to keep learning and researching things, but you know, outside of it, it's not really the case. So after after universities, many people just stop, or you know, they just update their knowledge if they are working in a professional field. So yeah, I guess, you know, probably industries also like entertainment or leisure, you know, that they still provide us with value, but do not take away from, you know, the resources that we have. So these are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Can I also add something on Carolina, because now that she was talking, I wanted to also add also what to Azar was saying. Definitely consumerism, well, our lifestyles have to change, definitely. So with this, and the way how we consume has to change, but also the way how companies create and design products. This should also change, that the products will be designed, that they will have longer life cycle, that also the products that will be produced will have a sense, will have a purpose. For example, fashion industry must change definitely, because that's one of the least sustainable right now. So our lifestyle and our consumerism will have to change, but also with that mobility. We can see that already now, as also Azar mentioned, the shared economy. We do not have to own cars, but also for, you know, shorter flights or shorter distances, we do not have to use flights, but more trains. But with this, it has to go hand in hand the prices as well. For now, if you compare Ryanair flights for €5 and then night trains for almost 150, it's hard for anybody to choose that option because of how the system is now created. So this will have to change from that perspective, not only the individual one. And then also tourism will change. I think this will be more, people will go spend their leisure time more locally, exploring also more local nature rather than going too international and overseas. Maybe it will also change that rather than having a 3-day weekend and going abroad will change, and the holidays will be taken for a longer time if this needs to be taken overseas, for example, and not just for one day trip to New York, for example. Yeah, so I just wanted to add this. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Katarina and Carolina, for your very interesting interventions. I couldn't agree more. Actually, I was nodding like the whole time. So, well, thank you very much. Is there anybody else that want to add any comment, proposition, question?
Tommaso,
please go ahead.
Yeah, what I was thinking is that in an ideal future, I see a mix of different scenarios. I was thinking, for example, not only about the geographical area, but also about the type of product or the sector. In my opinion, there has to be sectors, or maybe I expect that for some sector and for some products, a certain organization of production systems would be more desirable, whether there is a more centralized and centralized way of production and decision, while in other sectors it would be more desirable to have the free market competition that we see today in the current economic system. So maybe I could also point this out in the form, like what type of sector could be more desirable in terms of what dimension.
Thank you very much, Tommaso. This is also a very interesting insight indeed. Well, of course, please do share that comments in the survey, because of course afterwards, now that we have this general framework of general scenarios for the whole economy and maybe not the whole world, but more or less, but sure, next thing to do would be to go geographically, but also into sectors. But of course, this can allow us in the current moment or step of the research to populate the narrative of each scenario, which certain sectors that will be probably more in line with that kind of governance, of productive governance, and so that would be actually a very good incorporation. Any other comment or question?
Well, maybe a small question. When can we expect the results of the survey? Because I think it would be really interesting.
That's depending on how fast you answer. But I mean, we need to do the whole deliverable in writing. So I think the deadline is going to be asked for an extension. So maybe it's June. Because we don't know. It's the deadline initially is end of May, but it can be extended. But we will present it.
Yes, yes, we have in mind the deadlines for the deliverable, but yes, maybe we can come up with some feedback before, but because it would be very interesting to do so, and also because we value a lot your contribution. So yes, we will try to, maybe we can try to do it before, but yes, probably the final deadline will be those of the deliverable. But thank you very much, Kevin. And well, also Katarina is commenting that it will be also interesting to see how welfare would change, and such as, for example, in retirement schemes. Yes, indeed, as there are already some tests for universal basic income. Well, actually, one of the we thought about that specific case when we were thinking about this well-being based welfare state circularity, in which somehow the state would need to guarantee well, social justice. So maybe universal basic income could be one of the elements in that case. But yes, it's actually a very good, a very interesting thing to take into consideration. Thank you very much. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, maybe we can. Tommaso, yes.
Sorry, I have another question. I think, yeah, just a challenge. I want to share a challenge I met when trying to answer to the survey. I think certain scenarios are quite easy to imagine, but others are quite complicated because there are so many factors, and maybe also, I mean, we don't know a lot about them. So, yeah, just a little challenge.
I think, thank you very much for the question, Tommaso. So I think actually the challenge is to do that, to imagine them together, because we have put some of the elements, how this feature may look like, but also the exercise for you is to make this visualization, and actually the way because the way we make questions is to actually gather information. How do you see, what are the barriers, but also what social changes do you see? So actually we are using your feedback to build this visualization. So if you have problems or you don't see it, feel free to just express it. But also if you are imagining it and you are just filling this gap by yourself, please especially fill this in, because that's what the exercise is about partially. Yeah, we are all jealous of Kevin.
Well, okay. If it's any other question or comment, we can address it.
Yeah, I think we can close because we are 16 and we lost part of the people, so we don't have the wide conversation as much anymore. But yeah, I mean, we will continue getting feedback from you through the poll, and if you accept at the end and give us your email and your consent, not through sessions like that because this is a lot of time, but through more forums, so we can keep having this conversation and this feedback from you. So yeah, maybe we can close.
Well, thank you all very much for your time, for this very interesting conversation, and for your feedback on the poll. It's all very valuable to us, and well, this is from us. And well, we will let you know as soon as we have further feedback on how this deliverable is developing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.